check, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2, check, 1, 2, testing. 1, 2, check, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2.
If everybody wants to move to their seats, we're about to start the program.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started, and I wanted to lead off by introducing myself. My name is Chris Holden. I'm a former Assembly member, and I'm the CEO of LA Fire Justice. And I'm happy to be here with you this evening to welcome a subject matter, a conversation around soil contamination. And as all of you know who have been impacted by the fire and the loss of your home, this is something that you should not even having to be deal with. But here we are. And so it's an opportunity for us to share information, to make sure that you are getting as much as you can in terms of understanding, that you have an opportunity to ask questions through this process, and that you're going to have experts in this area who have studied this issue over the years and have interesting, hopefully, observations that you can take away and mull over. I want to start off by thanking the folks at LA Fire Justice who were so much a part of putting this evening together, and for obviously the care about looking at holistically all the issues that are impacting on the community. So if we can just get a hand wave from all of the LA Fire Justice folks and just give them a nice round of applause. It's my pleasure to introduce James Farr, someone who I've known a long time. He's a community activist. He is unapologetic in tackling the big, tough issues. And he has a personality on radio, and so he is someone who has been out there for a very long time, engaging on subject matter that's important for communities to be engaged on. And so it's my pleasure to introduce him at this moment. Please welcome James Farr.
Wow, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Holden, for the wonderful introduction. Make sure you add that to my tab, the kind words. Welcome, thank you so much for being here this evening. Again, my name is James Farr, and I am the host of Conversation Live Altadena Rising, which is the show of record when we are chronicling for the nation this devastating and deadly fire that ravaged through our community just about 7 months ago. So we appreciate you being here tonight with us. And again, let's give LA Justice a round of applause for convening tonight's event. So a little bit of housekeeping, right? The restrooms are out there, right? There are cameras in this room right now, so if anybody is sitting next to someone that they shouldn't be photographed next to, it's actually too late, right? So you better have a pretty good excuse, right? All right. I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming all of you here this evening, and our fine food provider, Perry's Joint, which is also a local business. I'm so big with local. Let's clap it up one time for Perry's Joint. And I'm sure I was supposed to ask, has anyone ever listened to Conversation Live, Altadena Rising, my radio show? No claps, no claps. All right. Now you have a reason to. Every week we are telling stories about this community because as long as this Black-owned radio station is on the air, we are not going to let Altadena be forgotten. And so we, every week, bring you new programming with stories and voices from within the community. I want to first acknowledge Mr. Boxer with LA Justice. Thank you so much for being here. One of the bright legal minds and pretty sharp litigator. I was reading your background a little bit. You've done a case or two, right? This not your first time. All right. Let's go ahead and welcome our panel up today. If y'all remember my name, I'm gonna move this. First up, we're gonna welcome Mrs. Erin Brockovich, Professor Josh West. Are you guys coming up? Yeah, you're supposed to come up here. I mean, that was a whole applause at one time. Thank you. Please have a seat. Please have a seat. We actually have a name tag for you.
Do I need a name tag?
Yeah, well, in case you forget your name. Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
And Professor Josh West, you can come on up with us, Professor West.
Good to see you.
Christine Hinkel, join us on stage. And Dr. Tripati, I'm going to get that right before the night's over. So I'm just pulling up my notes. I'm a paper guy and not a tablet guy. So we're just going to. I love having the paper in my hand. So let me tell you what we're going to do this evening, right? And I really appreciate your patience. This town hall was put together with you in mind in that we intend to hear more from you than you hear from us. Is that fair? But before we get there, we want to hear from these subject experts, right? Like, I know just a little bit, they know a whole lot, and then we have such a strong consumer advocate and activist in Miss Erin Brockovich joining us. Let's give her another round of applause. So the way we're going to do this, we're going to run through some very brief presentations, right? And then we're going to try to get as fast to the questions as possible. So one of the things I'm going to ask you to do, if you have that burning question that you just can't hold on to, I'm going to need you to hold it, all right? So write it down, type it on your phones or something. We want to make sure that everyone who wants to speak and has an opportunity to speak. But when we get to that point, I know the Salvation Army, right? So technically we're in church, right? So we're not going to do testifying and telling stories. We want to actually ask a question, all right? I'll remind you all of that when we get there. First up, we'll hear from Ms. Erin Brockovich, who is a consumer advocate, a non-attorney celebrity endorser, and she works closely with the folks at LA Justice. And she's going to start us off, but I'm going to actually start her off with a question.
Oh, that could be dangerous, okay.
Okay, you ready? You got your microphone? You got to get a microphone.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes.
Considering our President Donald Trump dismantling FEMA, taking away resources, and not quite providing the resources that fire survivors need that we had previously seen in other fires, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I think for all of us, it's really very disturbing, and I never like to get into the politics of it, but it's certainly bad timing. I do have a serious frustration, unfortunately, with our state not doing testing and deferring that to you, the people who've suffered and lost your homes and are having modular homes and uncertain about what is or isn't in your property. I've done a lot of cases here in California, and generally, and this is one of the first times ever, I've seen the state actually not step up and do testing. So I'm very frustrated about that. And it's really bad timing for any sitting president to stop funding to a state that has had these back-to-back natural disasters and communities in a real quagmire and great concern about the fallout from the fires and what is in the soil, what is on their property, what are they being exposed to. We need to test and we need to find out, because you cannot defend yourself if you don't know what you're building on. And I'm getting very concerned that if we don't address this, we're setting ourselves up for a large toxic litigation in the future, because everybody's now built on contaminated soil. And what concerns me even further, because enough of us are having insurance problems. Listen, I live out in Agora Hills as part of the Thomas Fire, the Woosley Fire. I've lost my fire insurance. It is so frightening to think that we would set our communities up in the future for another toxic litigation that opens the door for insurances to not insure us again. So I understand what's going on, and I'm very, very frustrated. And I think it's a bad time for politics to get involved in here when you need our leaders' help the most. So this is why we're having this meeting. I'm really happy to have the experts here. I'm always love it when they're here and what they do and what they can teach us. But you know, I wrote a book, Superman's Not Coming, and that's the position we're in. And we're going to have to start doing this ourselves. And it's how we're going to figure out to get everybody tested, whether it's the state, whether it's private. Insurance isn't covering a lot of it. We're going to have to get that place. You're going to have the information. You need to know what you're building on. And so being here tonight and having community meetings like this, and we need to have more, I think we even need to show up more at our own city councils. Somebody's going to have to come out here and start doing the testing so you know what you're living on. So we're here tonight for that reason, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the experts. Did that answer your question without answering your question?
I didn't ask you your party preference. No.
It's frustrating. It's poor timing. It's bad timing. And I think you can have this conversation, not us have this conversation, but work your funding out later. Right now, you have a dire situation in this state, and we're getting ready to run into fire season again. So stop your shit already. Get up here and do what's right by these people, and you can argue about your funding later. Bad timing to leave everybody in a quagmire sitting here like this when you need the funding and we need the testing. So somebody needs to do their job and get this done.
This subject is hard for a lot of people, Erin, and you've worked with communities across the country who have been in a similar, right? But it's not quite the same until it lands or it's in your own backyard, in your neighborhood. What sustains your hope? What can you offer people? We're going to get to some of the kind of not so fun stuff with the toxins and pollutants and all of that's coming up, but I don't want to keep it down. What sustaining your hope?
You. I'm here to support you. And you're my hope, and you're my inspiration. In every community I've been in, you've lost your homes. People lost family members. You've lost your pets. You're scared, and yet you show up, and you rise up, and you come back, and you fight, and you rebuild. You teach me everything. I am here to support you in making sure you get the justice that you need. How are we going to handle this? And that you know what pollutants are or are not on your property, what you're building your home on, and what you can be exposed to. So I mean it when I say this. You're my heroes. You've been through enough, and you've shown up. And it is my privilege to be able to be here and with LA Fire Justice and stand in support of you and help you in any way that I can to get through the situation you've been in. So I mean that from the bottom of my heart. You're my heroes, and thank you for being here and standing up and fighting. That's what it takes.
Thank you, Erin. Moving on to Dr. Joshua West, who is the Professor of Earth Sciences and Environmental Studies, Post-Fire Soil Chemistry and Contaminants at the University of Southern California. Now, one of the things I love about this panel, and we want to approach soil remediation in a very remedial conversation, right? My son says don't use all the college words, so we want to make it real plain this evening for everybody to understand. So if we get too far ahead, make a note, and we're going to try to make this as plain as possible. Professor West.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you to LA Fire Justice for organizing this. It's really fantastic to have a forum for discussing these problems that I think are very real to us all. I am, and I'm going to talk about some technical points, and please do stop me or ask. I guess you're not supposed to interrupt and stop me, but please do ask afterwards if I've become too technical and there are things that are not clear. But before I do start talking technically, I'll just share that I'm also somebody who's in shoes very much like yours in that I have a home that burned in the fires in January, and I have 2 small kids, so I know what it's like to try to figure out what to do and the uncertainty and the range of different challenges, and this just being layered on top, this question of soil contamination, what's on your property, and so on. With that in mind, I've been part of a group at the University of Southern California that has put together a program that we've called CLEAN. The idea of this has been to provide free testing of soils across the LA area, particularly for those who have been either directly affected by the fires or who've been concerned about the contamination from the fires that may have affected their properties. The motivation for this really came from a group of us, so this is a big team effort from a number of us at USC. You can see all of us here. Several of us, right even as the fires were still burning, realized the threat that the pollution from these events might cause. And we're not the only ones to have realized this at the time. But to us, it was something that was really personally important, not only in my own case, but others who had children, young children, wondering, is it safe for them to go to the playgrounds in their neighborhood? A colleague of mine living in Sierra Madre, others in Pasadena, and so on. Concerns that I'm sure many of you and your friends and those you know have faced. One thing we did in the immediate aftermath in January of these fires was go and look at roadside dust around the Eaton Fire area. So what you see here is a map. I'm no doubt familiar with that footprint of the Eaton Fire, which is still harrowing to many of us. What we did is we sampled roadside dust in the area within the Eaton Fire footprint, and then, as you can see from these circles on this plot, outside of that area. And we wanted to see, was there a signature of lead contamination associated with the fire? And so these were the results that we got, and what you see is the color coding that really indicates those darker colors in the fire, in the burn area. And this really stood out to us as something that was startling and really clearly demanded more more work, especially as we were getting these results and learning at the same time that the government was not going to be doing the same kind of comprehensive soil testing during cleanup of burned lots that they've done in past fires in California. So the combination of these results and that news really sent us home to think deeply about what we could do. And that is largely because what I just showed you were lead concentrations in soils, and lead is one of these contaminants that is of greatest concern following these particular fires, and that's because of the number of things that you can see here
about the effects of lead. And I think many people in the public health domain really emphasize this point that you see in yellow, that no amount of lead is safe in your soil. Of course, that's a really frightening thing to hear. It's a really hard thing to hear. And it's one that is, I think, both important, but also loses some of the nuance, right? In that, obviously, the more exposure you have to lead, the more of a concern it is. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a few slides. But this gives you some idea of why we were so concerned about this observation that we made soon after the fires of these heightened concentrations of lead in roadside dust, particularly in the Eaton Fire burn area. So recognizing this, one of the things that we started as it sort of started rolling out in February and March was a program that would allow community members to test their own soils. Many of you may have participated in that already if you've submitted a sample to us. How many in here have submitted a sample? Anybody want to? Okay. Many of you have submitted a sample. Well, thank you for doing that. I'm happy to answer specific questions you may have afterwards or general questions in the Q&A. If you're not familiar with this, anyone's eligible to submit a sample. You sign up, you follow this QR code in the upper right or the URL in the bottom, and we'll test the sample for lead. I'll mention this at the end. We're working to roll out testing for some other contaminants in the near future. You drop off those soils at one of these Dropbox locations. If that's not convenient, they can be sent to us in the mail at USC. There's more information on this on our website. You can see in the little pie chart, the vast majority of soils that we've had submitted have been from the Eaton Fire area. This is also the area where the lead concern is by far the greatest, and the data bear that up. You receive results that look like this. If you haven't received these results, and if you have submitted a sample and not received results, we should have cleared through our backlog. I know there was some delay for a while, but please let me know if you haven't received your results. We've also produced an interpretive guide that's available through that QR code. I've also put a flyer outside on the tables where you can go and look at that interpretive guide. This is what our results look like. There's a mapping interface. Feel free to go on and explore that. I owe some updates on that in the next day or so. We have a few hundred samples that are not on there. We have tested a total of 2,808 samples as of about a week ago. And you can see on the right a bar chart showing what those look like. Important here is to note that the California screening threshold, this isn't a threshold that necessarily says you have to remediate your soil, but the threshold at which you should be concerned and take further action is 80 ppm. So the majority of soils that we've tested have been below that threshold. But there are some that have been above, and even a few that have been in the very high levels of lead in the thousands of ppm. And one of the things I was talking to somebody before to emphasize is there's often cases in one city block where levels can range widely from below 80 ppm to many hundreds, even 1,000. One lot can be very different from another. And so getting the kind of granular property level information of testing your own soil becomes really important under those circumstances, right? It's not like you can assume, oh, well, people down my block got their soil tested and it was below the threshold, so I should be fine. Right? And that's a big part of our motivation for providing this kind of service where we can do large numbers of samples, not as analytically precisely as labs that, sort of commercial labs, but that's what allows us to test freely for so many people. I'll just show, for interest, this is what a little bit of sort of glimpses at how some of our results break down. These are distributions of the lead content from samples submitted from the Palisades and nearby area, the Palisade burn area and nearby, and the Eaton burn area and nearby. And you see that obviously this is a much greater concern in the Eaton Fire area. And a lot of that is because of the age of the housing stock in the Eaton Fire area. It was older, built during a time of the use of leaded paints, and much less of the Palisades housing stock was of that age. Not that there aren't cases in the Palisades of very high lead as well, but it is a bigger problem for those of you in the Altadena area. You can see this a little bit also here in terms of the sort of percentage of housing stock that was built before 1960. I think this is the cutoff. And we see that the lead levels get progressively higher. So particularly if you were in a neighborhood of older homes, if your home was a historic home, something to be particularly conscious about and think about. Okay, I don't want to take too much time talking, but let me just say that we've put a lot of effort also into trying to provide guidance on interpreting results. It's important to recognize when you look at the distribution of results, so if you're scanning through that spreadsheet, these are all samples that were self-selected. So people chose what to sample, and that has its pluses and its minuses. We really wanted this to be something that would empower you all to get the data on things that you wanted. But that means that we're not following, sort of standard protocols in each property. So there is a trade-off there, and it's something to be aware of when you look at the broad range of data that you see. What we found lines up pretty consistently with what's been found in the preliminary data from LA County. I'll also emphasize that LA County have found no consistent widespread evidence of lead poisoning in terms of blood levels. There's representatives from the LA County here at the booth outside. They're also providing a testing service that they're in the process of rolling out, or maybe have already started recently, particularly for people downwind of the Eaton Fire area. I encourage you to look at that. We are working with them on sort of making consistent protocols in what we're doing. If you have any questions, some people have had their soils tested by us and them. Finding differences of 30, 40% is not unusual given the methods we're using, but if you have specific questions, don't hesitate to follow up with us. If you or people you know have had results where the lead concentrations in your soils are above some of these screening thresholds, particularly if they're in the hundreds of parts per million or even the 1,000, should be good motivation to do further environmental assessment. These tests are really about screening. They're about like trying to find the properties where more work needs to be done. They're not saying, oh, the clean folks at USC found 150 parts per million lead on my property. I immediately need to take drastic remediation action. We encourage people to take these results and get more work done if they can afford it. We recognize that's not always possible, and I know that's a challenge. It is important to recognize that your exposure to lead, if you have a property that was affected by the fires, is a factor not just about the lead concentrations that you're seeing, but also about how much exposure you're going to have to those soils. So this little chart here gives you an example. You might find 200 part per million lead in an area of your property that's totally inaccessible. Maybe it's where you're planning to rebuild a home, or maybe it's under a deck. You're not going to have much exposure to that soil. That's going to be of much less concern than something that might have lower lead concentrations, but where your kids are going to be directly playing, sticking their hands in their mouth with dirty soil. So it does require a little more thought than just looking at the numbers in raw terms when you think about what the actual problem or area of concern would be. There are also things you can do to reduce your lead exposure. And honestly, these are smart to do, or at least some of these, like washing your hands and covering your soil, independently of the LA fires in January. We live in an urban environment. There's a legacy of lead pollution in our environment that's pervasive, especially if you or people live in the urban core of LA. So having kids wash their hands when they come in from playing outside, taking off your shoes before you track dirt inside, this is really important if you're concerned about contamination post-fire, but it also simply holds more generally for the exposure that you might have to the legacy of urban pollution. Lead is not something that tends to bioaccumulate. That means it doesn't tend to accumulate in the plants that you might grow in your garden, but that isn't the case for other metals. Other metals do accumulate, and that's something to think about if you have a garden, if you're thinking about replanting a garden. And so this is a whole area unto itself, and I don't want to take too much time to go deep into it. I think maybe Christine and some of the others might talk a little bit about thinking in those dimensions. I will mention that the approaches to remediation can be wide-ranging, and these fires, both of them, are so unprecedented in their scope that we need creative approaches to remediation. But it is also important to know that the traditional established approach to remediation of properties that are contaminated with something like lead involves a contractor coming, clearing out the soil, retesting, and if the soil is still contaminated, clearing out further soil and replacing that soil. That's very costly, so there's reasons that it may not be practical. But it is important to recognize that this is what has been done for fires in the past in California, and what remains the sort of recommended practice if affordable, even though, as we know, the federal government is not supporting it. Okay, we are working on continuing our testing. If you haven't submitted samples, if you're concerned, if you want to submit another sample because your property has undergone phase 2 cleanup, and you want to know, are things better, are things worse, please submit more samples. We're open and will continue to be open for that community submission. We are also working, I've emphasized lead, there are other contaminants in soils. We are working to give you more information based on the samples you've submitted about those, things like organic contaminants like these things called PAHs, without going into great detail about them. I will close there, but encourage you, if you want follow-up, ask me questions, but also follow this QR code, and happy to talk more on email, in the future, or if we have time within the rest of this town hall. Thank you very much again.
All right, thank you, Dr. West. And folks, you may have noticed outside in the patio area, the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health is here. Evan Cohen with the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health Health Inspector Stella Felix is also here with the Health Department as an analyst, as well as the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification. They're outside with information, and locally, Dina Soil Coalition is here. So you'll have plenty of time to visit with them outside and learn more about their resources and how they may help you. Dr. West, I wanted to ask a question, but I want to also keep moving on. But some have asked the reliability of a basic test that you'd buy at the local hardware store. Should we be concerned? I mean, is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think my advice would be, or I think what I'd say in response to that is there are, a number of different levels of sort of accuracy or of reliability that you might expect from different tests.
I mean, but is this like half pregnant kind of thing? Like
so yeah, I would say that, we are generally not advising people to go buy like a soil kit test from Amazon and try to test your own soil and like think of that as returning a reliable
Why
result.
not?
I think there are a number of reasons for that. That typically the accuracy of those tests can be questionable. They can be really they can depend on what the type of soil is, for example. Also, many of them are done based on like changes in color. You like look at a change in color and you read that change in color, and there's a lot of subjectivity and like assessment in that. The testing that we're trying to offer you is anonymous. It's free. It doesn't have the analytical precision. In other words, you're not going to get the same reliability that you will from a commercial test, but it sits in that middle ground. So, obviously, you should feel free to do what you want to do, but we're not the only ones. The county's also providing, the free testing. I'd encourage people to seek out those resources rather than try to do it yourself at home. Because you're going to get something that is more reliable than what you're going to get from a home testing kit.
Thank you, Dr. West. We'll land that when we get to the call to action a little bit later on in the program. Next up, I'd like to welcome Dr. Tripati. Did I get it right this time? Tripati. I'm working on it. We're going to get it. She's a professor and director of PI at UCLA. Her expertise is in environmental justice and sustainability. I think you're going to talk to us about policy and kind of
touch on some of the, talk about that, and also touch on some of the themes that build on some of the themes Josh built out too. So thank you.
Yes.
First and foremost, thanks to all of you for being here, and thank you to LA Fire Justice for putting this together. And secondly, I want to express my sincere sympathy and empathy for what everyone here and the community here has gone through. We, like Josh, we have a 2-year-old. We live just downwind from a burn area, and these impacts have been at the forefront of our minds. My name is Aradhna. My pronouns are she, they. I'm a chemist that measures environmental materials. I'm a climate scientist, and also do work with communities to support empowering them to have access to tools, right? And to use that to answer the questions that they think are critical. And so we support more than 500 people doing this work, including Danny Hogue, who's right here from Altadena, is with Dana Rebuild, and also works with a Better Watts initiative on issues of lead in the community. I want to acknowledge also the importance of community stewardship and indigenous stewardship for setting up the kind of broader context in which we're operating. As we know, we have a whole series of broken relationships with land and with institutions that have set the response for what we're seeing right now. And I might speak more strongly than Erin about what I think about what's happening with FEMA, especially as people are sleeping in their cars and they are worried about what is happening to their family members. It is an absolutely immoral travesty. With that, I also want to highlight that a number of partners, including Patrice Cullors, Lauren Bond, tribal co-chair of the Gabrielino Shoshone Nation, Gabriel Crow, and Ana Wakelmakak, an indigenous school in Northeast LA, are all represent communities that were strongly impacted by the whole conflagration of fires. And so together we have been advocating for rebuilding in a just way. That includes ensuring that soil measurements for contamination, that these are being done by community members, by youth, by students from the communities that are impacted. We've been advocating for the rebuilding to ensure that that is being done by community members from the impacted communities, right? That we're actually seeing that local businesses and local people are being supported. And so please take a look at a whole series of policy recommendations at this site in this petition for a climate resilient LA. We've been advocating at the city, county, and state level for this. And then I also want to highlight some of the work that is being done by Gabrielino Tongva fire scientists, including Seth Morales, who is from this area, looking at how do we recover from the fires in ways that ensure that there's sustainable land management, fire suppression practices going forward. This is from a recent event where these things were discussed. And they really talk about the importance of centering traditional ecological knowledge and community knowledge and how we rebuild. Many of you may have seen just like what were the houses that burned down, what were the structures that didn't, and can tell stories about why that was the case, right? What was there and what wasn't there. The thing I want to just really highlight is the Community Action Project of Los Angeles that my colleague Sanjay Mohanty leads, which is a project that supports free testing for lead, for arsenic, for mercury, for a number of different pollutants, microplastics, polyaromatic hydrocarbons. And what's important is that it does this in ways that community members can submit samples, but also community members and students from LA are doing the work, right? So we're employing people to do this work. And so the soil sampling protocols, there's kind of a whole series of questions that have been posed around how is that sampling done? What does that mean for what we then end up seeing? Are there some areas that tend to be more contaminated? than others. That can help inform how we build back. That can also inform how we design remediation strategies. But then also there's questions like, will the removal of 6 inches of soil do it? Can we do less? Do we need to do more? And then also, what do we see downstream with respect to ash? This work is work that involves the measurement of, as mentioned, a number of compounds, or 20 metals that he's measuring. And there's 2 different techniques that are used. So, you just heard from Josh about the reasons why these kits you can get may not be the best methodologies to use. And I also want to highlight that every method we use, some of them are more sensitive than others. Some of them have huge uncertainties. Some of them are ones that we can show time and time again are reproducible. And so it matters. And so in this case, they've been mainly focusing on one method called X-ray fluorescence that lets them do like a number of different metals at once. It's not as sensitive as it could be. And so just as Josh described, when we see something that's high, we can then go through and do a more sensitive methodology to really, understand exactly where is it at compared to the Cal EPA and federal EPA standards. So that's kind of giving you an idea of why that's the case. It's really important to also know that prior work that's been done in the San Gabriels, with folks in our community, Kingsley Odigi, showed that actually with fires in this area, you can sometimes get mercury being transported as well, another toxin. And a lot of the work that Sanjay has been doing, this team from the Eaton Fire, they've been seeing pretty high levels of lead and arsenic, but they've also been measuring things like lithium because of batteries and hexavalent chromium because this is often increased in soils and it's also toxic. So, so far there's been drinking water tested from a number of households, public parks, nurseries, pools, and also there's work that's underway looking at homes, and there's funding for doing 3,500 properties, and again, they're going through and verifying with a secondary method, also looking at sediments from beaches in the case of the Palisades fires. And then finally, I want to highlight another community-led project that's led by Promotoras, community health promoters at Esperanza Community Housing in East LA. We ran a project with them where they were concerned about environmental racism and environmental health issues associated with air pollution, because LA has the largest urban oil field in the country. And many of the community members lived across the street from oil fields, but didn't know it. There was like 17 of the oil wells underground for this one family, but then everybody started getting sick, and they started to want to map this out. So they took air pollution data and their environmental health data, they went knocking door to door in the community, held meetings like this one, and then they asked us to teach them GIS, and they taught us about environmental health and advocacy. And so from that exchange of skills and knowledge, we supported their campaign for an oil-free residential neighborhoods, and schools, and nursing homes across LA. And that's important because it actually was a David and Goliath story. It was an Erin Brockovich story. But what they succeeded in is actually getting oil wells banned in residential areas, a medical buffer zone built, not just across the city and county, but the state of California. So everyone in our state has that work to thank. And I know from and that matters to, my mom, that matters to my little one, that matters to me, and for all of us. And this is why what you're doing is so important, because of the legacy that's going to come from that. They took those tools and wanted to, after the fires, they started mapping the disproportional impacts on people, based on people in different groups and people in different sectors. And so they've been storytelling with that, and that's a community-led project. So with that, I just want to say thank you, and I'm looking forward to hearing from my colleagues and from all of you in the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Another round of applause. So part of a property can test higher, let's say, in one portion of the property versus another side of the property versus the other side of the property. I'm confused. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, thank you. Really thoughtful question. I want to emphasize that this, we have so many different building materials and natural materials around that what that means is just even on your home, depending on what was on different parts of the property, that can make a difference. There's also like, how did the winds blow? What got brought over, right? That makes a difference. And so not only do we see some of the things that Josh so thoughtfully described, where we're going to see differences if we look at, home garden, community garden, if we look at a playground, a daycare, home built at this time or this time. We can also see differences just within, a property because of that. And I also want to shout out that some of the really important mapping work that Danny did looking at housing infrastructure in Watts and across LA County, it actually mapped out that issues with lead in drinking water in Watts came from the age of the infrastructure, right? So when were those pipes put in? At that time, leaded pipes were used. So we have to replace those pipes if we want to see this stop. Well, it's important here because the age of the housing, dictates whether you have leaded pipes in your home or leaded paint,
Sure.
right? And so that also is important.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Plastic pipes as well.
Thank you, Doctor. Because something that keeps coming up, I've been confused. I'm telling you, I'm asking because I'm really curious and don't understand, right? But I understand the difference between an urban fire and a wildfire. And we hear language around the Eaton Fire as a wildfire. My understanding is how wood burns and the carbons is much more different than the materials or processed wood and the PVC piping, as someone pointed out, and all of the other things that go into that. So is it dumbing it down, calling it a wildfire?
Not at all. They call it urban, it's a conflagration fire because there were so many fires at the urban wildlife interface because we're literally the city up against the mountains, the town against the mountains, right? And that also feeds into the complexity of what we see and why you got to trust yourself. You got to trust your spidey sense. You got to make sure that you are looking at it and you're looking at the complexity of where you live, right? And not taking it for granted.
Thank you. So we're right on schedule, folks. We're just getting ready to get to the questions and answers. So I hope you've been kind of taking notes. We want to make sure that you have that opportunity to share with us. We're going to move on to Christine Hinkel, who is the principal and founder. She's a consultant of 301 Organics. And before you even get started, right, I think a question that I remember Ms. Joan Reed, who happens to be Mr. Holden's neighbor, asked me months ago, can she eat her persimmons?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Can she eat the fruit, the citrus?
Oh, the citrus
Yes.
fruit. And the persimmons. I would
That was her
forego it this
question.
season, but from what we're hearing is that the contaminants, if they are being accumulated into the fruits, or I'm sorry, into the plants, they don't reach the fruit. But to be safe, forego it for this season, for next year. And there's ways to test it. So to get some assurances, again, this is all about testing and having that confidence that you can move forward with your garden. But your vegetable gardens and your fruit trees are very different than your landscaped trees and landscaping. So we have to make that distinction too, thinking about.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump your presentation. I just had to.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
get that
That's a
in.
good question, really.
You go ahead.
Is that true? I mean, Josh said it was true for lead, but is it true for other things, right? That lead might not be taken up, but are there other toxics that could be in food in your garden?
So it's possible. So that's why testing is important. So that's why we're all here, is to really encourage, the testing pre and post. And that's really what my presentation is going to be on. I think I need to advance this. Okay. So I just want to give some context for my presentation and also my mental state. We're actually in a fire evacuation notice right now. I came in from the Antelope Valley, and my family encouraged me to still come because there's some really important information to share with you all. So I was a little torn, I'm a little distracted. So I will probably rely heavily on my notes because I'm watching the time and I want to honor the agenda here and get to the Q&As. Christine Lenches-Hinkel, 301 Organics. We're local to the area, small business, environmental consulting company. Born and raised in Pasadena, raised my 2 daughters here in Altadena. Rode horses up in the San Gabriel Mountains, so I'm with you. A lot of my history is here, and now it's my opportunity to give back. So I'm just very grateful to LA Fire Justice for inviting me here and allowing me to speak. For some of you, the information I am to present will be entirely new, but some I'm seeing some familiar faces. It's not going to be that new, but nevertheless, I wanted to be as concise and informative as possible to leave you with the sense that there is a pathway forward to restoring your soils and bringing it back to better health. And health is all about biology. So as the slide shows, we take a biological approach, not a chemical or mechanical approach to treating contaminated soils and your property. While soils testing and analysis is central to our strategy, I concur that you can't manage what you don't know. It is the attention to biology, the microorganisms that we can't see with the naked eye in our environment that is the driver of the success that we're seeing on the ground and the treatments that we're doing and the results that are coming back that have quite a bit of hope to give you all. But before diving into our approach and strategy and results, because I think that's what you're here for, is some answers, I'd like to share a little bit about our experience, our qualifications, and the journey to our work that we're doing in the community. The company, myself, have been members of the U.S. Composting Council for probably over 15 years now. We're actively part of the Association of Compost Producers. How many of you are familiar with compost? Awesome. So I'm going to put a little twist on compost today. But we did proudly serve the Rose Bowl Stadium for 8 years and we were their lead sustainability and organics management and compliance consultant. We essentially established a food waste recovery and on-site composting program for them to basically produce their own compost, which we've been coining a chemical-free fertilizer alternative that could be used on their rose gardens, on their football fields, and then at the adjacent golf course. But this is the crux. While we were composting at the stadium, we needed really the best-in-class guidance from the most renowned of soil health experts and biologists that could achieve in the field the highest level of results we could find. Because this is a best-in-class facility, we needed to provide the best-in-class remedies, right, and solutions. And the natural remedy for us, treating the turf grass in the landscaped areas that we knew had that legacy treatment of chemicals and chemical fertilizers. We turned to the Soil Food Web School, Dr. Elaine Ingham, and her school for training and advice. So we were working one-on-one with her and her team. And from the various trials that we did using the compost we were making from the food scraps, we were recovering, we knew we had the very closed loop solution we were seeking, right? Keeping everything local, all the materials, all the biology, keeping it local and getting it back on the ground. The testing and application methods we came up with at the stadium are the very same methods and approach we're offering to the community. And with some success, and I'll be sharing some of those results with you. Did I forget to advance? I think I did. Okay, I did. I'm going to go through this. I just talked about our affiliation. So our strategy, fire and soil restoration strategies. So in the most simple way I can explain what we do is that we take a biological approach to cleaning up the toxins that may be found in the soils. It's known as bioremediation. How many of you have heard of bioremediation? It's exactly what it means. You're remediating the soils with biology, right? And we do this on site. Now, there's options to do it off site, but we're really encouraging people that to keep that material on site because there's lots of organic material still. There's lots of minerals. There's still lots of microorganisms that we can assist and help repopulate, right? We do rely heavily, we do not rely on the removal of any of the dirt. So in counter to what the legacy practice has been, to remove that 6 inches, we're saying, hey, let's slow down. Let's do this another way. Let's do it with biology in mind. So what is bioremediation? Just add this to it so you can read the definition up there. It's basically a technique that leverages the natural abilities of soil microorganisms, such as bacteria and fungi, to decompose and detoxify harmful substances. This approach has been studied quite extensively to demonstrate its ability for modifying the toxicity of heavy metals, the asbestos, persistent chemicals like the PFAS that we just heard about, as well as hydrocarbons and the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds. We also lean heavily on plants to help bind and immobilize those toxins so that they don't reach the surface where you could be exposed to them just by walking on the ground or from the winds that might kick in and make them airborne for us to just breathe in. So any exposed ground is something you definitely want to cover with something. At the very least, whatever you got, cover it up. And this process is called phytoremediation. And it's basically some plants are tolerant of certain toxins, and they can even take them up in their roots and shoots, their trunks and their branches. And we just had the question about fruits, not so much. But when combined with soil microorganisms, they help, you need that foundation, right, to grow your plants in. So you have to start with the biology, right? If you try to seed or germinate a seed in plain dirt that really doesn't have the life or biology in it, then you're going to really have a hard time, with supporting life above ground. So we've really got to get not at the ground, but we got to go deeper still and get that soil structure going. And we can do that through the biology. So how do we get the biology on the property if it's missing and the ground is just dirt, right? And it's that light-colored, tan-colored, it's just sand, silts, and clays. That's where composting comes in. That's our forte. That's what we do really, really, really well, both at the individual property level, but also at the, more of a larger scale level, like at the stadium. Compost actually is the material we use to introduce the life and repopulate the ground with. It is the material that houses these tiny creatures responsible for building healthy soil, and the compost contains the food that they need to grow in numbers. So it's a combination. But how do we make compost? It's basically using food scraps. I'm going to go through this because all of you are all composters here. So I won't bore you with that, but you take the greens and the browns and the foods and you let the microbes eat it. So everything you don't eat, don't throw it away. Don't bag it. Don't put it in your greenways. Start composting in your backyard. Because what you're doing is recovering the life, right? You're salvaging your... saving them, so that they can go to work for you. Let's see, and then that supports, again, this whole closed loop cycle, right? Next is, we get this a lot, so what's your process? What's the time frame? How do you do it? And it basically starts with soil testing. Yes, we work with a certified laboratory that can do those accurate readings. We'll get a list of chemical lists of the CAM17s. We test for hydrocarbons, the gasoline, the diesel, and the motor oil level. And the CAM17s, the hydrocarbons, the VOCs, and then asbestos. We want to rule out asbestos entirely so that we don't have to test it again. But we don't just do pre-testing because we have to know what your baseline is before we start. But the added testing we do and recommend is biological testing, and it's a very nuanced approach. But yes, we can take a sample, look at it under the microscope. We can identify and count the microbes from bacteria to protozoa to nematodes to fungi, and we can get a biomass ratio. We can get counts, and we can compare pre and post for our treatments to let us know if we're heading in the right direction. If the biology is going to survive and if they're going to thrive and they're going to grow in numbers, then we're in a good space. If the chemistry is going to go down, if those numbers are showing post-treatment, then we're definitely on a better track, right? So the soil microscopy work is what we do, and we do that in-house to keep the costs down. And it's just basically to determine the extent of what's living in your soil now. And sometimes we're not seeing a whole lot. Sometimes it's all zeros, and we don't even do a bacteria count because we know the bacteria is there. It's everywhere. Those guys will always be there, but the other higher order microorganisms, not so much. And then we'll determine what's missing. Then we can translate that into what kind of compost that we need to bring to your property. You know, is it going to be bacterial-dominated compost? Is it going to be fungal-dominated? Do we need to have the protozoa in there because you have a standing home, but you still have lead levels that are high, but your landscaping looks great? I'm sure some of you may have landscaping that has just blown up, right? So this is pre and post. These are just some sample results we were getting. We actually, when we interpret this data, we're going to look at 3 different thresholds that are coming out of, yes, the EPA, the Department of Toxic Substance Control, and then an additional one that is a chemical lookup table, or a chemical lookup table, yes, with a goal to reach. And it's for the Santa Susana testing laboratories, where it's a recreational space that they wanted to detoxify because it was highly contaminated and it's on tribal land. So those levels are even lower than the 80. It's in the 45, 42 range, something like that. So we'll sit with you. We'll talk you through these numbers and what they mean to you. So you're not, just blindly trusting us, with, hey, it's either good or bad. No, we're going to actually talk you through these numbers and sit with you. This is a report we prepared, just kind of a summary, where we were actually seeing, this is our 17th property that we've done. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're not inventing the wheel. We're just doing what we knew how to do. So we were able to get on the ground pretty darn early in early February. So we're on our 30 plus property for treatments. And so we're able to kind of compile some data, composite data, and kind of interpret what the patterns are. But on this particular one, you can see that the VOCs for baseline was 0, post was nothing. The hydrocarbons went from 65 to non-detected, so it actually went below the threshold. And as for metals, 11 out of 17 were actually identified as above threshold for this property. And when we did the treatment that we did, in post-treatment, only 4 came back as above threshold. So we're seeing more of this trend than not from our properties. And from just a summary, out of, I can't see it, there's a glare on here, but most of there's a block that we did. There were 5 properties at one time, and that's what I would encourage all of you to really get with your block captains, and get this done as a collective, because you're creating a protective kind of buffer for yourselves. There's going to be some cross-contamination, just the winds, right? And if you could do that collectively, then your numbers and probably feel safer. But these numbers are showing, the different property numbers and how many of them started out as high groups of numbers that were above thresholds, and then how much went down, how many of those went down. Similarly, on the biological side, we'll run those tests too, a pre and a post. Again, we're doing the counts. The numbers are low, but because they're microorganisms, they're really tiny. But we are seeing in the first sample, the very first property that we did, we actually found, and there's a 0 in there. There should not be a 0. There should be a 2 in there. I know that for a fact. But the fungi, went from 3 to 3. You got actinobacteria from 1 to 13. And then in the 17 sample, there's literally 0 across the board except for the last microbe. But we're seeing those numbers go up. We want to see them higher, but again, this is a trend. So our soil treatments look like this. Basically, after the results come back, then we say, all right, well, you're going to need this much compost to spread, a certain depth, and this much mulch. We've curated a seed mix, of hyperaccumulating plants that we know are tolerant of certain metals that can take up the metals in their tissue. And we'll get out there with our team and start spreading. We'll also add a high inoculant of a liquid biology. So we make this compost. We know how to make compost, and we know how to test what's in our compost. And so we bring that to the property and inoculate, and then cover it with mulch, just like covering, your baby at night. Put a blanket over it and make sure that they're, not dehydrated and that they're protected, right? We really treat our microbes like our family and our babies. Time frame, we get that a lot. How long? Well, the results that I showed you, the last one, was after 20 days. We took a post sample and we got that result. However, not all of those metals went below the threshold, right? So we still need to monitor. We still need to treat. We still need to get that biology back on the ground. Right. We need to recover all the organic material that currently is being hauled away from our cities, right? Trees are being cut down at a very accelerated rate, and they're getting hauled, I don't know, hundreds of miles away, and yet we're not just missing out on the organic material, we're missing out on the biology. So it could take upwards of a year. But I do want to put this disclaimer up. We're making no promises, but we are definitely leaning on the science that's out there, and the field and case studies that we've studied and depend on. And there's our QR code if you would like to learn more about the costs involved, the different phases that we go through. You can go to there, and hopefully we'll hear from you. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Christine. Let's give our panel another round of applause. This is that time where we are going to hear from you, and so I have, who has the mic on this side? Well, we're going to get to your questions for sure, but there's mics on this side, and there's mics on, are we coming to people? Is that how we're going to do it? Okay, all right, so we're going to jump straight into the questions, but just real quickly, 6 inches, is that deep enough? Is yes, no, I know it's a whole other explanation, but just real quick, yes or no?
I decline to answer that question.
All right, you draw your conclusion from that. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Daniela. I'm one of the Altadena residents, and I have a couple questions for Dr. West. In your circle, your blue circle, how many property, how big is that area, and what's the difference? Is that an average, I assume, and what's the standard deviation between the samples?
Yeah, so the first slide I showed with the map that had the blue circles, those were from testing of dust from street gutters. If I try to go back, it'll be a lot of slides. But and those we went to several different sites at like a street corner and collected dust to composite it from multiple points. But so that represents just like the environmental signature. Oh, how big they're like a city block? So each circle there's like one city block, basically. Now, in the clean data, the map, the interactive map that you can look at on our website, those are associated with individual properties. And each of those is one sample that people have submitted. Most people have submitted a single sample from they've chosen where to sample it. Some people have composited samples, like they've gone to multiple places on their property. We do have the opportunity now to for people to submit more samples from their property, to the point that Aradhna brought up about, there's a lot of variability even on one property, but right now the data that we've had, because we can only process so many samples so quickly, was one location.
The question, right? We want to allow as many people to get as many questions. So
We can talk more after.
I'm going to have to put a little caveat on that one question, all right? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Diane Wolke. I'm also a Trojan. In January, an article in The Atlantic referred to LA as a plastic city, given the amount of petrochemical plastics both inside and outside of our homes: textiles, vinyl and laminate, flooring, blinds, upholstery, synthetic clothing, and more. Outside, we have composite wood, vinyl fencing, plastic pots, artificial turf, all compostable, all combustible. You're wearing off on me, Christine. As you are aware from your advocacy work, Erin, in Dalton and Calhoun, Georgia, the carpet and synthetic turf capital of the world, toxic per- and polyfluoral substances, PFAS, known as forever chemicals, are but one of 15 categories of toxic, hazardous, and cancer-causing chemicals and plastics. Based on your knowledge of PFAS, would you recommend PFAS testing of soil, and under what circumstances? And based on what you've learned about PFAS in carpets, would you support a ban on outdoor carpeting, including plastic turf? I would also ask that you please submit comments to the LA City Council file for the ordinances that were brought forward by Council Member Bob Blumenfield on PFAS, as well as PFAS and synthetic turf.
Well, the short answer is yes. The forever chemicals, PFAS, it's a huge problem, and it's in almost everything we have. It's in our landfills, it's leaking into the aquifers, and you're probably going to find it on your property with everything that's melted in these fires. So it's definitely of concern. It's going to be America's problem. The PFAS is everywhere. So I would absolutely think that is something, we were just kind of talking about that could be tested for. I hope that kind of answers your question quickly. PFAS is a big problem, a big deal. I would anticipate to see it possibly in your testing, and I would be looking for it. I think that you need to know every compound that could potentially be on your property that could be toxic, that's above levels, and it's important that you know that so you can get it cleaned up. And everybody's asking great questions about different depths, 6 feet, 8 feet, 12 feet, what's that number? I hope everyone in here takes advantage of everybody here, then take advantage is the wrong word, participates with them and what they're doing to try to facilitate you building back better.
Oh, excuse me.
I'm so frustrated. Real frustrated. I don't want you, we can't be comfortable anymore, and you can't be complacent. And you cannot assume that anyone's going to come magically fund this or pick the pieces up for us. We are going to have to do it. You need to ask every question, good questions, know what you're looking for, work with organizations that will come out. And I'm frustrated because these fires should have never happened. We've been working these fires all the way back to Northern California, to Santa Rosa, to Paradise, to the San Bruno explosions. This is, and you touched upon it just for a moment, infrastructure. I hope and I have seen a total absence in any governmental state oversight on these utility companies and their infrastructures. And I sure as hell hope somebody's making a phone call to them before this next fire season. Yeah, where's your guys got another 102-year-old transmission line that's ready to electrify and blow up and burn down another community? So my message to you really is, you can change things locally. You can change things individually. You can change them collectively. I've seen it happen over and over again. And you can change things showing up even at your own city council. Everybody from the top all the way there has a lot to answer for. And oftentimes what's missing is us. I want you to ask them those questions. I want you to show up and get them to do their jobs. And I don't want you ever thinking somebody has got your back. They've shown us that they're not. My job and everyone's job here tonight is to arm you with the best information we can give you so you can better protect yourself, your home, know what you're being exposed to. And I don't like to be involved in politics, but unfortunately, when things like this happen, you're going to have to. Pay attention to your local ordinances, your local city council, what bills they're passing, all the way to Sacramento. And don't assume they're going to do the right thing by you. So I want us to show up in force and make them do their job. So be on alert. I'm glad you were here tonight. And I just want you to remember, this is on us now. Do not think somebody's going to give you the next warning. It didn't happen. So I'm frustrated because these fires should have never happened, and it was an absolute, complete failure of leadership from the top to the bottom. I'm sorry. So we have to wake up. We have to rise up and pay attention. Pay attention. I am so jittery. Fire season's coming. I'm so jittery. We're hearing about this already. I live in a fire zone. My heart goes out to all of you. It beats every time I talk about it. But be prepared, pay attention, and when you need to go, go. You are the most important thing. And we can deal with everything else when you get home, whether we have a home or not. The most important thing is your observation. And when you need to go, don't think someone's going to come along and tell you to go. I want you to go. So it's time for us, we're going to stand up for ourselves, one by one, in a community. I've seen it happen over and over again. We can do this, and you will come back. And I'm really thankful for all of you to be here tonight and give us information and tools. And I do hope that you work with all of them so they can get to your property, tell you what contamination you do or don't have, and on your way building out, redo your soils, and get back your dream. That's very possible. And that will happen when we wake up and we don't assume somebody's going to do it for us. So I am frustrated, but there you go. So,
There you go.
All right, that's Erin Brockovich. A round of applause. We're going to get to everyone's questions. I promise. Right? Just quick announcement. We also have cards here that you can fill out, right? And we'll get those answered. Also, there are the resources outside that you're more than welcome to check into. We're definitely going to get to everyone's questions. So I believe you were next, sir.
Actually, I have the mic, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, all right.
I'm over here.
Okay, you got it. All right, go ahead.
Thank you.
I thought but yes, you go ahead.
I appreciate that. First of all, thank you, Mrs. Erin Brockovich, for being here. I've been following you a long time, and I'm so excited that you're here. I'm a resident that lives on the easement of Southern California Edison. It's my backyard. And so we'll talk offline for that. But I want to go back to the moderator's comment that he asked to the panel here. Could you please provide guidance on who I should contact to arrange for the pickup of contaminated fruits and vegetables from my home, as I am concerned about the impact of the recent fire? Are there specific local agencies or services that handle such situations? And I'm glad that this has been brought forth because maybe as a community, we can have an agency come in the neighborhood and just pick those fruits from our trees, because we have to find a way to discard them. And I love the fact that it was mentioned, because I think a lot of people don't realize that we should not probably eat that fruit. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just quickly answer that question with a question in return to the audience, because you know we've been providing this service for testing soils, and something that has been on our mind is whether to provide a service to start testing fruits and vegetables. So I'm curious from all of you, how many of you have fruits and vegetables that you would be interested in contributing to have tested for things like lead or mercury or other? So there's a handful of you. I don't have an answer for you in terms of I don't think there is a specific agency, right? The assumption is that you would put it into your compost or put it into your waste, because the likely outcome is that if the fruits and vegetables are contaminated, they're contaminated at a level that you would not want to eat, but that they're not going to cause additional contamination if they're sent to a landfill beyond normal household waste, right? So in other words, the threshold for what you should be concerned about eating is different from the threshold for what you should be concerned about in terms of sending to a landfill. The landfill gets all kinds of other waste as it is. So, I would be more concerned about evaluating whether or not to eat things than I would be about where you're gonna dispose them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My take on it.
Thank you. So we have this gentleman
Can I
here.
add to that? May I piggyback off of that response?
Let's get a couple more questions, because I really want to make sure that we hear from the audience. Yeah, thank you. 1, 2, it's on. It's on.
All right, appreciate the panelists. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jabari Brown. I studied environmental sciences before and dealt with lead, arsenic, and cadmium. Nowadays, I'm a litigator, but I still do have an interest in toxics. I wanted to know from you all's expertise, is there any big bad? What's the worst one from an exposure standpoint? Not so much from concentration or bioavailability, but what might we want to look out for if we do testing and we find that one big bad chemical or a class of chemicals? What should we really look out for?
Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few that I don't want my baby or my mom exposed to, right? Lead at any level. Lead for any age group. Arsenic, mercury, right? And then, the PFAS that we were just talking about, right? So, and there's more, but so to me, there's a whole class. No, I mean, but those are some of the things that are just huge red flags for when we worry about, when I worry about what's going to happen to my mom and, neurodegenerative disease, dementia, the risk factors with that, for kiddo fertility, and all those things. So, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Gentlemen all the way in the back, wave your hand at the end of the line. Not you, at the end of the line. That's the end of the line. If anyone else wants to ask a question, you may want to, we'll allow a couple of more people. We're going to get through these few people before we wrap it up. Sir, you have the mic.
Yes. My name is Bill McCandless. I'm a resident of Altadena on the west of Lincoln Avenue. Dr. West, do you have any pre-fire baselines for lead and other heavy metals in the region?
Yeah, it's a really, really tough question, right? And I know many of you want to know, okay, my property has lead contents in the soil above screening thresholds. Was it there before? Is it from the fire? I don't have a... Okay, well, you're lucky, but... Yeah, it's really tough. We don't have good data from Altadena per se, right? There are a couple ways of getting around that. One is to do a spatial substitution, right? To look at I showed you the map of lead contents from Sierra Madre across Altadena. It's not a perfect comparison because the communities were built at different times, right? But that's one way of trying to get at a baseline. But it's really hard. So the answer is basically no in real terms. So, sorry.
Thank you. Sir?
Yeah, I live in Sierra Madre in the canyon, and we got hit pretty hard too. We had 131 mile per hour winds, and Our values are extremely high. We're way off the charts as far as anything to do with inside our home, which was tested by Pat Moffat over here, who's like the best hygienist in the state. Like anything from 60 times lead inside our house, and copper 70 times, zinc 50 times, vanadium 25 times. And he's such a pro at finding all that stuff, and he basically said we're cooked, which is the nicest thing he said. But anyway, but I wanted to get to the soil samples right outside our house, so we've been testing the rest of the neighborhood as well. We have 27 homes, I think, that we've tested so far, and 2 more today. Everything's, 80% of it's probably over 400 at least for outside soil samples tested at the LA County facility dropped off at Woodbury. And we're just trying to figure out like what else we can do because we're all doing this together as volunteers in the neighborhood. A lot of people have their head in the sand, but we're doing our best to help out the neighborhood. It's like a little Tokenville where we live. We're all really close. So I guess the question is basically, do you have any thoughts on how we can take these results and move with it or do more results in a different way, just to, because only for lead, unfortunately for the soil, we're just looking for a little bit of help or advice, I guess. And I'm signed up with you guys already. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would really encourage people to consider within these communities bringing what they're finding and their concern, the data that they're getting, the measurements that they're getting, bring them together and, you know, developing these community-wide maps where you can dive deeply into things, the types of things Josh was showing, right? And then actually, like, I'm gonna make an offering. There may already be things like this happening. The center has a power building strategy in LA. We're gonna be running, in the 2 months ahead of us, workshops on advocacy online, right? So that, in our case, you're also seeing, you know, what's happening from the federal government and how they're attacking LA with the ICE raids and with what's happening at UCLA, but also with the fire response. And I'd say, consider coming to those, because we're gonna give you tips on how to go to Sacramento, how to go to this city, how to go to the county, and how to go to the federal government to drive change. And this is a really critical time, you know? People need to hear your voices. And then the money for cleanup, you know, the money from the utilities, like all those things can happen if we collectively take action, as you know, Erin was talking about. So that's like just, it's a tangible, you know, and then the community can plan on sharing those stories there and giving testimony.
We got one over here.
One quick announcement. We also have, in case anyone is interested, Rodney, would you want to wave? Say, stand up and wave, Rodney. Rodney is with the American Red Cross, and they are also doing soil testing. So make sure you see Rodney before, and any of the other vendors outside. I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead with your question. Oh, we're over in that question.
Hi, my name is Tyrone.
How you doing, Tyrone?
About 2 months ago, I went to an LA County Supervisors meeting with Catherine Barger. And after I spoke about what we went through as a group for everyone, she thanked me for what I said, because she said she was here and saw the catastrophe. And she pledged, proposed, and passed by the county $3 million for the testing. I'm wondering, is there an update on that, or has it been distributed, or where's it going, or how's it going?
That is happening, and that's what's supporting the county testing. They have a booth outside, and I encourage you to go talk to them. But yes, that's where that money's gone.
Okay, thank you.
May I add a comment? There's a lot of talk about testing, right? But the properties need to be treated. They need to be treated like from day one. And we have the material within our communities. We need to have a more active voice and advocacy around recovering our trees, our wood chips, bring more compost in. There's plenty of compost out there. If you don't want to do it, you know, the full-blown, you know, full-service way, there's DIY ways. Contact your gardener, get them, you know, to bring in a truckload of wood chips. Bring your community together to go spread it. Cover the ground as quickly as you can. And if the money's out there from the county, ask for it to go towards treatment, because we have data. We have plenty of data. We all know it's contaminated. I'm sorry, I'm just being much more vocal right now because I'm frustrated. We're in August, and we knew this back in February. That's why we started the treatments back in February. Get your grounds treated. And ask Barger for the money.
Well, it's no secret government moves at 2 speeds, slow and slower, so.
The power of small business.
Next up.
So I'm Jeremy, I'm from Altadena. I think my frustration right now is that I am going to the meetings with Catherine Barger. I am going to the, Altadena Town Council, but they're only on Zoom. And we have to submit questions and they don't answer them. How do we make noise when we can't physically show up at a meeting and it's only Zoom? It's like, how do we embarrass these politicians? Catherine Barger's made a lot of promises, but when we call her office, they don't return phone calls. When we send emails, they don't return emails. When we email the Altadena Town Council, maybe we hear back, maybe we don't. So how do we make noise collectively so that they're not going to save us, but they should hear us?
Who is this on Zoom that's not answering anything?
Mr. Box.
So Catherine Barger's the supervisor. Yeah, so she only holds Zoom conference calls. She won't, so for the recovery, she'll only do Zoom. We're supposed to, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So any help would be great.
So my life as a lawyer has taken a very circuitous path, but my last name, I come from a family of elected official. You used to be your U.S. Senator. I know a lot about how elected officials operate. My initial reaction when you were asking the question was, go vote. My second reaction was, run against the people that aren't answering your questions. And I have personal experience, only not me. I never had the guts to put my name on a ballot. But I sat in a living room, my mom did it when I was 7 years old, and then when she lost that race, and then won for elected office 4 years later. And it happened because she was pissed off about the fact that no one was responding to her concerns about open space. And they said, Barbara, you should run. There's someone in this room who's going to run, or should run, because they're not answering your questions. I'm a lawyer. I can only do certain things for my clients. And for those of you that are my client, thank you so much for trusting us in this case. But there are certain things I can't do as a lawyer. That's why we have all these panelists up here to tell you and give you information about the choices that you need to make in this regard. But bottom line is, go do something for your community. Organize yourself. I will be there to support you. I can give you all the information about what we can do to hold the utility accountable. But if you're not getting the right answers from your elected officials, who you pay the salary of, yeah, go run against them. Honestly, I mean, so I guarantee you someone out of this fire zone is ultimately going to be run because they didn't feel that they got the type of respect and response that you all deserve. So if they're not spending the money the right way at the county on testing, and you don't like it, and you got a better way, go for it.
Yeah.
I can take it from there. The gentleman that asked the question, where did you go? Okay, so if you can't show up, I'll tell you, I have seen some of the most effective campaigns against any board of supervisors or any politician through social media. And they will jump on whether it's Instagram or they're recording a Zoom, they're not there, and calling them out. It's a really powerful tool, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. So you have the power right here too, to blast that out. Other people will see it, they'll join you, and that can become a force that calls out those supervisors through social media. I watched some of it going down on Palisades, and you have lots of community members who didn't lose their homes that will pick it up and that will join in, that may have the same frustrations with their board of supervisors. So that is one thing that you can do if you can't be there. or organize others that can. But it's really important to show up in numbers. My coworker back there, Bob Bocock, we had this big issue back on Carousel track in LA with Shell Oil daylighting. We brought about 2,000 people into a meeting, and I'll tell you, things changed the next morning. So organize locally, organize those that could show up. In numbers, they tend to respond to that. Or you can really watch numbers multiply on starting a social media campaign. That can oftentimes be effective.
Yeah, Kwame Ture spoke about organize, organize, organize. And organizing doesn't start, what do they say, the best time to plant a tree for shade is when? 20 years ago, right? You have to be organized. You have to be vigilant. It's not fair to you that I can get the supervisor on the phone and on my radio program, or the mayor or district attorneys or assessors. That's not fair to you, right? But you have to organize. Connect with me. I'll help you get a response from her. Next, sir.
All right, over here.
Next.
Social media campaign, they work.
Thank you. I'm heeding your call, Ms. Brockovich. I'm a local activist. I work quite a lot in local politics and activism with environmental concerns. And we all know that plastics are one of the most toxic things we have in our environment today. More and more things come up every day about the toxicity, the cancers that it causes, the heat island effects. It's in semen, it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. And I'm also, with all due respect, Ms. Brockovich, I'm calling you out right now because I wanted to hear the question answered. If you at LA Fire Justice will make a commitment to exposing how dangerous and toxic all these plastics are. And, it's very hard to get rid of them, but that one ad hoc committee I'm on right now is an anti-artificial turf ad hoc committee, and I'm hoping that you can answer that question. Would you at LA Fire Justice make a commitment to exposing the truth about how dangerous exposure to all these chemicals are? And in fact, Dr. Tripati, I saw in one of your slides, the Community Action Project, there was a slide of artificial turf. I'm not sure what that was, but.
Ms. Brockovich?
Yes. Here we are, and we're going to continue to talk about it. So, yes. Well, artificial turfs have changed from the other ones. Sometimes they can melt in fires. In a water crisis, if people can't do the landscaping, or you're in a homeowners association that's requiring it. So it's, you know what, Bob right there is the best person to answer that on artificial turfs and PFAS. Yeah, you are. And I understand your concern. And I work on PFAS every day and everywhere we go. So.
She said yes. She said yes.
I said yes from the get-go, yes.
Yes,
but to answer your question about that, Bob Bocock works with LA Fire Justice. He and I have worked together for 39 years. One of our biggest campaigns has been 10 years before anyone else knew about PFAS was about PFAS. So if you have some specific questions about issues, he's a really excellent expert on PFAS to talk to about. But you always have our commitment. We're working across this country on PFAS. And whether it be Dalton, Georgia, or Maine, we started up in Maine, where you can. Oh, yes.
She answered
it. Yes.
Yes. Let's all say
yes.
All right, you got it.
So I would probably recommend after the rebuild not to put in artificial turf in your home. I think that's how we can conclude this. is to not put in artificial turf, get the biology, get living cover on the ground. Best recommend.
All right, folks. I promise you, not because we want to go. We could obviously stay here and talk about this all night. And for those that left early, they didn't learn that all of this is on the test. Let's go.
All right. Is it my turn? Hello. All right. This is for the USC professors. Excuse me, Dr. West or whomever. My name is Gio Finelli. I was blessed with being able to work with the EPA as a subject matter expert on the recon phase 1 and for U.S. Army Corps of Engineer for phase 2 for hazardous materials, specifically asbestos and lead, which is my specialty. One of the things that wasn't addressed, and I would like maybe it to be addressed, lead is a heavy metal neurotoxin. The most vulnerable are children under 6, kind of lightly addressed. The entrainment of soil being moved by heavy equipment and entrainment of dirt and dust getting in the air and re-entering buildings. As many structures burnt, many structures still remain. What are we going to do to address the interior living spaces for those? Because it's not just children, it's also for people that have pets. And the statistics are most veterinarians are the ones that diagnose lead poisoning in homes because pediatricians are not testing for children. So could we maybe have that addressed of what your understanding is of what we're doing for the interior spaces? Thank you.
That's an excellent point, though, about the animals. They're the first line that can really start to tell you a story. That's all I had to add.
Yeah, I mean, it's also an excellent point about the remobilization during cleanup. There are emerging data showing that some of the main thoroughfares used to transport debris had higher particulate aerosol concentrations, directly attributing those to the, like it's, as you know, direct attribution is really hard. Interior, we spent some time in planning this, debating whether to talk about interior contamination. It's not just from that remobilization, it's also from smoke damage. Anybody who, familiar with this, it's a can of worms would be hard to fully address, but it is something that people should be aware of and think about. If you have a standing home in or adjacent to the burn areas, the more you can do to understand the state of your home now, the better. That's all I can say.
I also want to point out that there's a environmental racism, a racial justice issue there, because a lot of folks were kicked off of their insurance just before the fires, right, in the time before that, and that didn't hit all groups in the same way, right? And that's really problematic because folks who had insurance that were in those areas, you can then file a claim for smoke damage, for cleanup, if you're living downwind, even if your house wasn't burned down, right? But other folks cannot. So I'm really glad you brought that up. It is a source of toxicity. We have to worry about it, whether you have children, whether you have elderly people, middle-aged, right? And if you have pets, it's also being tracked. Thank you.
Yes, gentlemen.
We covered a lot of things, but are you guys still paying money on plastic bottles and containers? Are you? The answer is yes, but they're no longer collecting them at the supermarkets, but they're taking our money. That's what we're concerned about plastic. They're not recycling them anymore. Where are they going? And I'm guilty of buying soda and other drinks. Gatorade have launched a campaign with new drinks, and the kids just buying them up like they're free. And I'm telling you, there's no place to return the plastic bottles. Not around here.
That's a living legend.
Yes, they're charging us.
I won't out him.
They're charging
in
us
civilian clothes.
to get rid of the state is. The state's taking the money, but they're not doing their job. That should be at the top of the list. Thank you much.
Thank you, Ms. Butler. Last question. All right.
Hi, sorry, last question, guys. I have soil that was lab tested at 900 parts per million, and I was wondering, is there a website? Are there any studies where that data where I could submit that data? Because I know you're doing your own study. I know Amazon tests are one level, and my insurance went ahead and tested the soil at 900 parts per million, so I didn't know if there's anywhere where that data would be useful for anyone. And no, the insurance nor FEMA will do any remediation.
Yeah. So are there any are there any places where community members who are getting tested, their soil's tested, water's tested, whatever it looks like, place they can contribute it? So then that way, like Josh showed those beautiful maps. I showed some of the beautiful ones from, Sanjay's got things like this, tables. You showed really beautiful data sets as well. So we can really start to make the case, right, for change.
So have a look at, somebody mentioned up here, EFRU, Eaton Fire Residents United, have been compiling test results from a variety of different types of testing, mostly indoor, like contamination. If you're not familiar with it, they do have some of the resource online. I would suggest contacting them in the first instance. The count we do meet with the county every couple of weeks, and like other partners like Sanjay and the CAP LA folks. In general, we're trying to keep each of our data sets that are done by the same methods consistent. So we wouldn't want to post something that was done by a different method. But try EFRU as a starting point. For EFRU? Yeah, Eaton Fire Residents United.
Yeah, and we as 301 Organics, we're partnering with them as well to get our data that we get cleared from our clients added and mapped out as well. So we're talking tomorrow. We're looking at how we can create this metadata type of file that's uniform. There's other groups that are doing the work, the treatments, in the communities. One is out there, Hardy Californians, and Soil Wise is another. So we're connected.
Okay, just one more? One more?
One more? Last one? Once, twice?
Hi there, thanks. I don't just wear these clothes to pretend. This is actually my job. I ride horses, and Los Angeles has about 3,000 horses. A few hundred of them are at a horse show. You're all invited to come and see at the Los Angeles Equestrian Center over the next few days, a big Grand Prix on Saturday night. But we have a waste stream problem. It's been a big issue. And particularly when they closed down the landfills, and it became a soil production issue for many entrepreneurs. So there's an interesting fact that I just looked up and that I've learned from training as a conservation planner for the USDA to try and manage our problem, is that horse manure has a high phosphorus level even after composting, and that's a good binding agent for lead, a good remediation agent. And we produce 10,000 yards of it a month and have many different sources and many different directions we can deliver it to. City parks are already using it in pretty large quantities. I just wanted to make that announcement because so many of our friends with their, that have lost their homes. There are 4 or 5 of my friends lost homes at the Flint Ridge Riding Club, and we contacted them, and we will be going there. Another vice president of my nonprofit is an architect, and she showed up at a house site where she is rebuilding in Palisades, and they had already spread 3 inches of this equestrian topsoil down.
That's exactly what we use in our treatments.
So somewhere in there's a question, right?
Well, I mean, really, I wanted to know how valuable it is for the 2 environmental panelists here. I mean, I work with Christine. The availability of this, organic matter to remediate these burn sites?
It's extremely valuable. It is not a waste resource. It has those, it not just has the biology, but it does have the nitrogen and the phosphorus. So there are free sources of it, for sure. We are partnering with Altadena Stables, and Duncan has access to it. There's a difference between raw horse manure and composted horse manure. So there is a process it needs to go through. And that is what we can help you on. There's other free resources like wood chips, right, around town. So so yes, to that question it's extremely valuable. And we need to create a different type of model for recovering and then treating, our community. And it's doable. It's nature's way.
Well, folks, give yourself a round of applause for sticking it out to the end. Thank you so much. Let's give our panel a wonderful round of applause. They'll be here for a little bit longer afterwards. Excuse me, sir, I'm still doing this now. Let me finish doing my job, then you can carry on your conversation with Ms. Brockovich, okay? I know, we are done, but there is a call to action that I have to leave you with, right? So if you're listening and you can hear me, I need you to not guess and test, all right? That's what I want you to take away from here. Don't guess, test, all right? Can everybody say that with me? Don't guess. One more time. And Ms. Brockovich said, don't assume, because you know what that means. Thank you, LA Fire Justice, for convening this. Good night, folks.
I got